Today, we're going to dig into a story that is, well, a truly incredible cautionary tale. It's about a nation that was blessed with almost unimaginable wealth, and then somehow managed to engineer its own complete and total collapse.
To really get the scale of this disaster, you just have to look at the before and after. Back in the 1950s, Venezuela wasn't just doing well, it was the fourth richest nation on the planet per person. Richer than Japan, richer than Spain at the time. Fast forward to today, and the average person gets by on about $150 a month, and that's including government aid. The drop-off is it's staggering.
And that really brings us to the central mystery of this whole thing, right? How on earth does a country that is literally sitting on the largest proven oil reserves in the entire world, we're talking more than Saudi Arabia, end up completely and utterly broke?
Now, let's be really clear about something. This wasn't some natural disaster. It wasn't a meteor strike or just a string of bad luck. This catastrophe was built, piece by painful piece, by a series of deliberate decisions. It was a perfect, man-made storm.
Okay, so to understand how this all went so wrong, we have to start with the underlying condition. Think of it like the core illness that made Venezuela so incredibly vulnerable. Economists have a name for it. They call it Dutch disease. But really, you can just think of it as the curse of having way too much easy money.
So what is this Dutch disease anyway? Well, it's this bizarre economic situation where a country finds a ton of something valuable, in this case oil, and that one booming industry ends up poisoning every other part of the economy. It's a true paradox of plenty.
And here's how it works. It's actually surprisingly simple. First, a flood of foreign money comes in to buy all that oil. This makes the local currency, the bolivar, skyrocket in value. Now, a strong currency sounds great, right? But here's the catch. It makes everything else your country produces, whether it's coffee or cars, insanely expensive for anyone else to buy. At the same time, all the stuff you can import from other countries becomes dirt cheap. So the result is pretty predictable. Why bother farming when you can just import cheap food? Why bother manufacturing things when you can buy them for less? Slowly but surely, Venezuela just stopped making things, even basic stuff like toilet paper. The entire nation's economy was left standing on one single wobbly leg: oil. So you have this chronic illness, this Dutch disease, but it was manageable. It wasn't a death sentence. What came next, though? That was a series of 3 fatal policy decisions that took this manageable problem and turned it into a terminal condition. The first big wound was self-inflicted under President Hugo Chavez. The government decided it wanted total control over all the country's wealth, which led to this massive policy of nationalization. The plan was brutally simple. Take everything. The government just seized control of thousands of private companies. Not just the oil giants, but food producers, power companies, telecommunications, you name it, they took it. And the consequences? They were immediate and they were catastrophic. Foreign investors, obviously scared that their businesses would be next, ran for the hills. The newly state-owned companies became hotbeds of corruption and inefficiency. And maybe the most damaging move of all, they fired the skilled professional engineers at the state oil company and replaced them with political loyalists who knew absolutely nothing about the oil business.
The result was a total collapse in the country's only real source of income. Oil production plummeted from a peak of 3 million barrels a day to less than 1 million. They were literally killing the goose that laid the golden egg.
Okay, so the economy's already bleeding out. And what does the government do next? It delivers the second cut, a policy of aggressive price controls that just seems to defy the basic laws of economics. Now, the stated goal sounded noble enough: make sure the poor could afford basic goods. So the government ordered businesses to sell things at a fixed, super low price. I mean, just imagine you're a baker, and a new law says you have to sell a loaf of bread for $1, even though it cost you $2 just to make it. What would you do? Well, what happened is exactly what you'd expect. It's not rocket science. If you force companies to lose money on every single thing they sell, they're going to stop selling things. Businesses either shut down or they just stop producing. Supermarket shelves went totally bare. Of course, the goods didn't actually disappear. They just flowed into a massive black market where the prices were dozens of times higher. The policy achieved the exact opposite of what it was supposed to do. So, let's just recap for a second. We have no production, no goods on the shelves, and no foreign money coming in. So how does the government pay its bills? This brings us to the third and final cut: They just decided to turn on the printing presses.
With the actual economy in total ruins, tax revenue was zero. The government was broke. So the solution under President Maduro was terrifyingly simple: just print more money. Print it to pay soldiers, print it to pay government workers, print it to pay off debts. Just keep printing.
The result was one of the most extreme cases of hyperinflation in modern history. At its absolute worst, the annual inflation rate hit a mind-destroying 130,000%. It's a number so huge it's almost impossible to comprehend.
But let's try to make that real. What that number actually means is that the money you worked your entire life to save became completely worthless. Not over decades, not over years, but in a matter of months. A lifetime of hard work, just gone, erased.
So, as we do the autopsy on this economic collapse, what are the final lessons here? What are the warnings that this story is just screaming at us? It really all boils down to two critical, fatal errors.
First, the absolute danger of putting all your eggs in one basket. Venezuela bet its entire future, the whole shebang, on a single commodity: oil. When oil prices were high, life was good. When they fell, the country had absolutely nothing to fall back on. And that's a lesson for nations, for sure, but it's also a powerful lesson for any of us as individual investors.
And the second fatal error? Well, it was pure arrogance. It was the belief that political power could somehow defy the fundamental laws of economics. They tried to command prices into existence and print their way to prosperity, but you can't fight gravity. The market always wins in the end. Reality bites back, hard.
And that's why this story is so deeply haunting. It's not about a lack of resources or a lack of potential. It is about a series of truly disastrous choices that left a country with the world's largest oil reserves in absolute poverty. It really is the tragic story of a beggar sitting on a mountain of gold.